Hi, Carl here for Pro AV TV. I'm at one of our open days here at Pro AV, joined by Ollie Kenchington from Coro Films, Coro Academy, bit of both?
Both, indeed, yes, yeah. I'm greedy, I thought I'd have two companies.
One company's not
One
enough.
wasn't enough, I wasn't busy enough, so I was like, let's start up another one, let's start a film school. Yes, hello Carl, very nice to see you.
Hello. So, this is a Canon C200 open day. What sort, roughly, very quickly, what are you talking about today?
Well, the big kind of thing is raw light and what it gives us in post, and how that opens up things like kind of really good quality HDR, but also kind of dispelling a few myths. I think a lot of people worry about MP4 in the C200, so I've got a kind of a side-by-side comparison. I've got the same shot raw, shot MP4 and graded to match, and we're going to play a little game and see if people can spot the difference.
Do you think they are going to be able to?
I think if you know what you're looking for, I think you can spot it, but hopefully it kind of doesn't matter whether they do or not. I think whether you do or you don't, you can't help but notice that they are incredibly close. Yeah. So we're going to be talking, I mean, it's really, my bag is always the numbers. I'm quite technical as a colorist. I think it's hugely valuable to really have a very deep understanding of the kind of underlying technologies, how sensors work, how encoders work, and so we're going to sort of break down the numbers, and basically the take home is don't just look at a piece of paper that says 8-bit 420 and disregard something, because it's
numbers are super important, but they're not everything, are they?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, I think the general kind of overview of the camera, but both in terms of hardware as well, because although I'm a colorist, I started out operating camera, and I still do. Under Coro Films, we do an awful lot of film production work, and if I never touched a camera, we would have huge subcontractor bills. I use enough DPs to, without me having to not pick up a camera. So I do operate a lot still. So we'll also be talking about, my experiences actually using the camera. For me, it's a great tool. I think it's one of the best cameras that you can get, certainly in that price bracket at the moment.
Let's talk a little bit about the journey to get here, because I followed you for a while, followed your work, and
you're
always...
the one.
I was that one follower at the beginning.
Right, okay. That makes sense now.
There's got to be one, right?
Yeah.
I always thought of you as a bit of a Sony guy, to be honest. I mean, you were a big FS5 user and an FS7 user.
Yeah.
What changed?
For me personally, a lot changed. I think it would be misleading for me to say that as a company we don't use Sony anymore. I mean, we've got a 3-day shoot coming up the rest of this week, which is entirely FS7. But that's because I'm hiring in DPs and B cam ops and C cam ops, in fact, on that one.
So the camera choice is dictated by what they're already used
I think, and also what we can easily get hold of 3 cameras is a big multi-cam shoot. So, there is still, I think, a lot of particularly freelancers and sort of owner-operators that are, are operating with Sonys, and that's absolutely fine. And we certainly don't, as a company, have a policy of we're not going to work with Sony. But personally, for particularly the corporates that I mainly shoot, where I need to grab a camera and have flexibility in a number of situations, I was just personally finding that the FS series weren't really giving me the flexibility that I needed. And when the C200 came along and I had an opportunity to play around with it on a project, the differences were stark to me just straight away, and the flexibility that it offered. And so, I literally didn't pick up. I had an FS5 at that point. We used FS7s. We hired in FS7s or hired in operators with FS7s all the time. But I personally owned an FS5, and I actually stopped using that day. In fact, in this presentation, I've got the shot, which was the first shot I filmed.
Was that in the woods?
Yeah. So it was last autumn. I took the camera out and found a tree with some beautiful kind of like bright orange leaves all over it, stuck it in RAW and hit record, and that was the first shot I captured with that camera, and literally didn't touch the FS5 after that.
What do you think was the biggest feature that made that happen? Was it raw light?
I think that's the killer, definitely. In this presentation, I talk about my top 5 hardware features that kind of attracted me to this camera. As soon as you get it in your hands, you can feel it's a far more robust camera. I think it actually plays slightly into to people's advantages, potentially the FS5 being so light, but it's light because it's plasticky, you know, and that's fine. I think if you really want something that's incredibly light to maybe put on gimbals and stuff like that. For me, I tend to be on sticks more than anything else, or if I am on a gimbal, I tend to be mirrorless on a gimbal. So I didn't mind the extra weight, and once you actually feel, you know, a solidly built camera, it kind of makes you feel, yeah, I probably deserve this. I've just spent like $6-7 grand.
It's reassuring.
Probably should have something that I know can get knocked about. I mean, I've taught at universities and film schools for years, and before I set up my own, I tons and tons over the last kind of 10 years or more. And I always think it's quite interesting seeing the kit that's in kit stores at universities, because that kit gets really hammered.
If anyone can abuse equipment, students can.
Honestly, they invent new ways every year to abuse it. And, you know, the Canon gear, C100's always been a very popular camera in universities, and the Canon gear is always just still working, still going strong. It'll have dings on it, it'll look aesthetically scuffed and stuff, but it's still working. And it was always the cheaper, more plasticky kind of, you know, the Sonys and Panasonics and things like that that were constantly back for repair, constantly out of action, and I think that speaks volumes. So when you get the C200 in your hands, you're like, this is I don't want to say tank because it makes it feel like it's cumbersome. It's still a relatively small, light camera, but it's well built. I like little things like the fact that the XLR, we didn't have one of the XLRs on the handle. That annoyed me about the FS5 because I like to use my Zacuto recoil handle on top with a little with their little Z rail, NATO rail set up. So I suddenly could get that back out the box and use it with the C200, whereas I couldn't with the FS5. You know, the fact that it's consistent button layout across the whole range. So it doesn't matter which Canon Cinema EOS camera you go to, the button layout on the actual camera is the same, which seems so blindingly obvious, but no one else seems to do that. Again, it's got to be that raw light. The fact that you can, at the flick of a switch, unlock up to 12-bit, you know, raw 4K DCI is kind of mind-blowing, really. It's a big thing.
What I find fascinating is that nearly all the conversations that I have with customers about the C200, and a lot of the reasons that I personally choose the camera for a lot of my own stuff, is the autofocus. Now, you haven't even mentioned autofocus once, so it's quite refreshing almost to hear some of the other features of the camera talked about. True.
I think, as I say, I'm a colourist first and foremost, so...
Whereas I am not.
So for me, I mean, I'm exposed, even if I do shoot stuff, it tends to be because I'm grading, I'm doing the posts on it, so I'm often thinking from that point of view. But you're absolutely right, the autofocus is a huge feature of it, and I do use it, and I've got to the point very quickly where I'm using it kind of intuitive. I don't really think about it. So I had to shoot some behind the scenes for a short film yesterday, which is part of a bigger project that we're filming the rest of this week. And so I'm shooting this guy who I've already done an interview with, which I used the autofocus for because I had to go and shoot it on my own. Well, I had a sound guy, but I had to operate on my own and ask questions. Yep. So autofocus saved my ass there. Oh, excuse me. But yesterday when I was shooting behind the scenes, completely different situation, obviously. You know, I think people kind of like, even AF sort of naysayers would be like, oh, okay, with an interview, fair enough. But, you know, that you're run and gun, completely, you know, no shoulders, literally just hand-holding the camera with a stabilised lens, running around this, they were shooting in a church, this short film. And, you know, being able to literally hold the weight of the camera with one hand, and then I'm supporting the front of the camera by holding the LCD, and I'm just tapping. Yeah. So I'm literally just racking focus that way. But what's really cool is then occasionally, you know, it's not faultless. Occasionally there were situations where it was too small, or I was trying to rack focus through a tiny little gap between like the DP's head and the monitor to the director in the background, you know, and I'm kind of moving across like this. So what's really nice is literally you can tap on the first bit, and whilst you're doing your recording and you're doing the move, you can flick into manual focus, and then you can manually focus to finish the rest of it. And I think it's too simple to just say, oh, it's got good autofocus. It's got good kind of augmented manual focus as well. So you can focus manually on what you want, and then it will pick up and make sure it stays in that area, which is really cool. A lot of what we all find is infuriating about autofocus is that it's making the decisions for you, whereas Canon have done is they've really given you the control back. Yeah. I mean, they've done two things to address that. One, they've made it so it's incredibly accurate. So actually you can start to just let it make those decisions for you to a certain extent. But as I say, there's like that sort of last 1% where there are tricky situations which just trip it up, and that's where they've been really clever in implementing some fantastic kind of augmented manual focus modes, which either by using on-screen graphics that tell you if you're behind or in front of your subject, or as I say, kind of letting you manually focus, and then it kind of goes, oh right, that's what you're after, and then it'll stick with it. So which is just so clever. I think, you know, whatever algorithms they've come up with for that, just yeah, mind blowing.
Well, I think we should better get some customers in here
Yes.
and start the actual day, should we? Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.